Hi, this is Elizabeth Ross, and this is my final media clip project for assessment and special education. The least restrictive environment is something that was coined originally by IDEA in 2004. Basically, it means that students should remain with their non-special needs peers in their regularly assigned grade level classrooms as much as possible. They shouldn't be automatically pulled out into a separate school or a separate classroom environment just because they're identified as being special needs. The first step would be to try to modify the regular classroom environment and provide whatever supports necessary for a student to remain with their peers and in their normal classroom environment as much as possible, as much as they can be successful. Students may need services outside their classroom, such as instruction with a special education teacher or other service providers like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, music therapy, but that doesn't mean they should just automatically be separated the entire school day. With that in mind, some students may still need a separate classroom setting due to the severity of their disability. Components of the special education assessment process. The special education process is called a cycle because even after students are identified and an IEP is written, the special education team continues to take data, give instruction, make modifications on those instructions, and monitor the progress of the student to make sure that the interventions being tried are successful. And this process continues and repeats throughout the time the student is at the school. There are 5 parts to the special education process, special assessment process. The first phase is called identification referral. And basically, the first part means that teachers screen and identify students that are struggling in school. There are pre-referral intervention strategies. Teachers have to show that they've tried everything they can to make the student successful within the regular education environment before they are then referred and parents are notified. Phase 2 includes determination of eligibility. You design the individual assessment plan. Parents must have permission before a student can be assessed. And then after permission is granted, this includes actually administering whatever tests are deemed necessary by the special education team, the scoring, interpretation of the procedures, reporting the results. The parents are given the results of the assessment regardless of whether or not the student actually qualifies, including informing the parent about the decision for eligibility. Phase 3 is program planning. If the student is determined to qualify as a student requiring special education services under IDEA, the student will receive an IEP, which is an individualized education program, and parents must agree to the IEP. The key is parents have to be kept in the loop and informed at all stages. The IEP is created to detail information such as the student's disability category, their current performance level, goals for improving performance levels, and details who exactly will be helping the student, what services they'll be receiving, and what environment they'll be receiving the services, for how long, and it should also include the accommodations that the student might need to be successful. Phase 4 is the program implementation and evaluation. You actually go about following the IEP, and this also includes continually cycle of monitoring and evaluating student progress. There must be at least a once-a-year review of the IEP and a periodic reevaluation of eligibility. Again, parents must be informed of this process. Encouraging family participation is very important. First and foremost, you should always communicate with parents about concerns and always get permission to do any kind of testing based on those concerns. If you are always communicating with your parents, it shouldn't be a surprise with them when you might formally suggest they be evaluated for special education if you've been openly communicating with them all along. You should always share findings of evaluation with the parents, regardless of whether or not their child qualifies for services. There are cases where they might go through the entire evaluation process and then it's determined their student doesn't need services, but the parents still should know that, and they have the right to view all educational records for their child. You should invite and encourage parents to come to meetings about their child, including the IEP meetings. They must be given appropriate notice, which is determined to be at least 10 days prior to the meeting date, and you should agree on a time and place that works for everyone. That doesn't mean everyone has to be there at one place at the same time. That can be difficult when you have a student has a lot of different providers. You can do phone conferencing, you can do video conferencing, but it should be a time and place that works for everyone. You should always listen to parents' concerns and ideas during meetings. A parent is considered a part of the IEP team, and their ideas are valid, and they have to agree to whatever ideas go into the IEP. You can partake in a parent interview, preferably before the evaluation process, but really any time to learn about a student's family history or medical history that might be relevant to their needs at the school. Another part of an IEP process includes interpreting derived scores, and there are basically 3 different types of derived scores that you're going to have to interpret to decide whether or not where your student is falling. One of them is called a percentile rate, which basically compares a student that you're evaluating to a norm reference group, which is usually a peer group of the same age. So if students at 3rd grade, they're going to compare them to a peer group, an average norm of 3rd graders. And it shows how compares their score to students in the norm group who scored at that score or lower. So a percentile rank of 30 would means 30% of students in 3rd grade scored 30% or lower, basically. Standard scores are calculated from a mean and a standard deviation, a basic average. Statines are basically range percentile scores that are divided into 9 equal segments. And then each of those segments is a half-word standard deviation apart. And all of these scores can be compared and converted between each other to show where a student is actively performing at the time of evaluation. Thank you very much.